Commander Zextile stared at the dying stars displayed on his command screen. 3 years ago, his people had ruled over 50 worlds. Only 7 remained, and even those were falling rapidly. The Vorik swarm had consumed everything else, leaving beautiful planets as barren husks. "Sir, we've lost contact with the Ninth Fleet," reported his aide Kethfer. The young officer's blue skin had paled with fear. "That's our last major defense force," Zextile muttered, closing his fists as he tried to think. The Zarian Empire, once the mightiest power in this region of the galaxy for over 1,000 years, was now crumbling. Their ships were swift, their weapons precise, and their tactics honed by countless battles, but none of it mattered against the Vorik. The swarm did not fight like civilized beings. It disregarded honor, rules, or negotiations. Instead, they consumed everything in their path, transforming living worlds into breeding grounds for more of their kind. Victories against them were fleeting, defeats absolute. "How many worlds have been evacuated this week?" Zextile asked. 2, Commander Kethfer replied. "But the refugee ships are overcrowded. Many didn't make it out in time." Zextile walked to the viewing port of his flagship, the Eternal Glory, beyond the glass. The last remnants of his once mighty fleet drifted a mere 300 ships, battered and barely functional, their crews exhausted by endless battles. Sir Kethfer spoke softly. "The High Council is requesting another strategy meeting." Zextile almost laughed. Strategy meetings, as if they hadn't tried every tactic imaginable. Direct assaults, defensive strongholds, guerrilla strikes, and even scorched earth retreats. None of it worked. The Vorik adapted to everything, learned from every encounter, and returned stronger. "Tell the Council I'll attend," Zextile said. "But first, bring me the Outer Rim survey files." "The Outer Rim? But those worlds are primitive, Commander." "There's nothing there that could help us." "Nothing conventional," Zextile agreed. "But conventional warfare has already failed us." For the next hour, he pored over survey data from the galaxy's fringes. Most of the worlds were barren or inhabited by pre-space flight creatures. But one report stood out, a small, blue-green planet. Called Earth, its inhabitants, humans, had caught the survey team's attention. Despite only recently developing faster-than-light travel, their approach to warfare was unlike anything in the galactic archives. The humans fought with an ingenuity and ferocity that bordered on primitive. Their tactics, deception, sabotage, psychological warfare were alien to civilized species. Most unsettling of all was their refusal to surrender. When cornered, they grew more dangerous, not less. Historical records showed countless instances of small, outnumbered human forces achieving impossible victories through sheer determination and brutal strategies. "Interesting," Zextile murmured, studying the report. Fighting itself, refining weapons and strategies designed for absolute destruction rather than honorable combat. Perhaps they were exactly what the Zarian Empire needed. "Kethfer," Zextile called. "Yes, Commander." "Prepare the long-range communication array. I want to send a message to this Earth. But, sir, they're barely more advanced than animals. What could they possibly do against the Vorik?" Zextile looked at his aide with weary eyes. "Maybe nothing. But we've exhausted every other option. Sometimes the only way to fight monsters is with bigger monsters." The communication took 3 days to reach Earth's solar system. The message was straightforward. The Zarian Empire was on the brink of extinction and desperately needed help. In return, they promised knowledge, technology, and an alliance with what remained of galactic civilization. Admiral Jake Morrison was overseeing routine patrol exercises with the human fleet. His flagship, the UES Defiance, was one of humanity's 50 interstellar vessels. Though crude compared to alien technology, each was designed with one purpose: war. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from beyond the system," reported Communications Officer Betty Stone. "It's not from any of our ships." Morrison frowned. First contact protocols were clear, but direct alien communication was unprecedented. "Put it through to the analysis team. Get Captain Lisa Grant down here." Within minutes, Captain Grant arrived, her science team close behind. Despite her youth, her expertise in xenobiology was unmatched. As the message played, her eyes widened in a mixture of excitement and dread. "My God," she whispered. "They're asking for help." "Help against what?" Morrison demanded. Grant replayed the transmission, highlighting the translated segments. "Something called the Vorik Swarm. From what I gather, they're on the brink of extinction and desperate for assistance." Morrison shook his head. "We've barely got 50 ships. What could they expect us to do?" "I don't think they realize how limited our resources are," Grant replied. "They're offering everything they have: technology, knowledge, and alliance." Morrison studied the star charts displaying the Zarian Empire's location. It was thousands of light-years away, but humanity's new jump drives could cover the distance in weeks. The question was whether to intervene in an alien war. "Get me General Paul Carter on Earth," Morrison ordered. "This decision isn't mine alone." The conversation with Earth Command grew heated. General Carter argued humanity wasn't prepared for galactic warfare and should focus on defense. Others countered that this was a chance to secure alien allies and technology. Finally, Carter relented. "Admiral, this is your call. You're there, and you understand the situation better than we do. But if you commit our fleet, you may be leading humanity into a trap." Morrison looked around at his crew. They were capable soldiers, trained for war, yet yearning for peace. Now they faced a choice that could shape humanity's destiny: prepare the fleet for a long-range jump. He ordered, "We're going to help them." As the human fleet prepared for departure, Morrison couldn't shake the feeling that this decision would change everything. The aliens had called for help, expecting a conventional ally. Instead, they were about to encounter humanity at war, a force the galaxy had never witnessed. After 2 weeks in hyperspace, the human fleet emerged at the edge of Zarian territory. Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance, gazing at the massive space station dominating the viewport. Kith Moria was unlike anything humans had built, gleaming city in space, housing millions. "It's beautiful," murmured Captain Lisa. Grant beside him, admiring the alien architecture. "It's also damaged," observed Captain Tony Rodriguez, over the come from the UEES Ranger. His sharp eyes noted the scorch marks and missing sections. "Evidence of recent battles?" "Incoming transmission," announced Betty Stone. "They're requesting docking permission." Within hours, the human diplomatic team boarded Kith Moria. Lieutenant Commander Nick Hayes led the delegation, accompanied by Chief Engineer Maya Brooks and Marine Colonel Steve Parker. They traversed halls filled with alien onlookers, whose gazes were a mix of curiosity and desperation. Commander Zextile greeted them in the main briefing chamber. The Altheran leader, tall and elegant with blue skin and graceful forearms, radiated an air of command. Yet Hayes noticed the exhaustion in his 4 eyes and the way his shoulders drooped under the burden of leadership. "Welcome, humans," Zextile said through a translator. "I must admit, you are smaller than I anticipated." Colonel Parker stepped forward, towering man with a battle-worn physique. He exuded confidence. "Size isn't everything, Commander. We're here to help." Zextile motioned toward a holographic display in the room's center. A 3D map of local space appeared, marked with red zones representing Vorik-controlled territory. The crimson swaths dominated the map. "This is our situation," Zextile explained. "The Vorik swarm has devoured 43 of our worlds in just 3 years. Every victory we achieve is fleeting. Its defeat costs us dearly," Zextile admitted. His exhaustion evident, Engineer Maya Brooks studied the tactical data streaming across her tablet. "Your weapons are incredibly advanced energy shields. Directed particle beams, faster than light communication. Why haven't these advantages been effective?" "The Vorik don't fight like civilized beings," replied Kethfer, who had joined the briefing. "They have no honor, no rules. They attack in overwhelming swarms, relying on sheer numbers to crush us." Commander Nick Hayes frowned as he reviewed combat footage from recent battles. The Zarian fleet moved in flawless formations, their ships coordinating with stunning precision. Their weapons fired with clinical accuracy, every shot meticulously calculated. In contrast, the Vorik swarmed like a plague, their organic ships moving erratically. Despite suffering massive casualties, they never retreated. adapting to Zarian tactics after every engagement. Your combat doctrine is very structured, observed Colonel Steve Parker. Of course, Zextal replied, perplexed. Warfare must adhere to principles of honor and precision. Anything less is barbaric. Parker and Hayes exchanged looks. The colonel, a veteran of countless brutal conflicts, had seen what survival demanded. The Zarians' rigid approach to warfare was already revealing its flaws. Commander, Hayes said diplomatically, would it be possible for us to observe a battle firsthand? That can be arranged, Zextal agreed. The Vorik probe our defenses daily. Another attack is imminent. The attack came 2 days later. From Kith Moria's command center, the human team observed the Vorik bioship's approach. Vessels resembled a grotesque fusion of insects and sea creatures, their organic hulls pulsating with strange patterns. All ships. Maintain formation, Theta 7, Commander Zextal ordered. Prepare for coordinated energy discharge on my mark. The Zarian fleet shifted into precise geometric formations, designed to maximize firepower while minimizing vulnerability. Their maneuvers were as elegant as a choreographed dance. The Vorik advanced in chaotic waves, their swarm a stark contrast to the Zarian precision. When the fleets clashed, the Zarans unleashed devastating energy beams that ripped through the Vorik ranks. Explosions lit the void as dozens of bioships disintegrated. But the Vorik didn't falter. For every ship destroyed, 2 more took its place. They crashed into the Zarian lines like an unstoppable tide, their sheer numbers overwhelming the defenders. Fascinating, murmured Brooks, jotting notes on her tablet. They're not relying on superior tactics. They're absorbing losses to achieve their goals. Parker watched grimly. The Zalfirians are fighting a gentleman's war. The Vorik are fighting for survival. Guess which strategy works better? Battle raged for 4 hours. The Zarans inflicted heavy losses, destroying over 300 bioships, but at a steep cost, they lost 8 of their own vessels. By the time the Vorik withdrew, both sides claimed victory. We destroyed over 300 enemy vessels, Zextal announced proudly. Our formations held flawlessly. They accomplished their real goal, Parker muttered to Hayes. They tested your defenses, learned your response patterns, and bled your fleet a little more. They can lose 300 ships. Can you afford to lose 8? That evening, the human team gathered in their quarters aboard the station. Hayes reviewed tactical footage while Brooks analyzed Zarian technology and Parker scrutinized personnel data. They're fighting this war all wrong, Parker said bluntly. Perfect formations, predictable tactics, rules of engagement there. More focused on appearances than on winning. The technology gap isn't as wide as we thought, Brooks added. Their systems are individually more advanced. But our ships are tougher. The Vorik have adapted to formal warfare, Hayes observed. They've countered everything the Zarians can throw at them, but they've never faced human tactics. What are you thinking? Brooks asked. I'm thinking it's time to show them how humans fight, Parker replied with a grim smile. No formations, no honor, no rules, just winning. The next morning, Hayes requested a meeting with Commander Zextal. The Zarian leader looked worn, the reports of losses and a worsening refugee crisis evident in his demeanor. Commander, Hayes began, we'd like permission to engage the next Vorik attack. Zextal's 4 eyes widened. It's your 5 ships? That would be suicide. Maybe, Hayes admitted, but we want to try our methods. Your methods? Zextal asked skeptically. You have no experience in warfare at this scale, Hayes smiled. No, Commander. We don't have experience with civilized space warfare. But we've been fighting each other for millennia. We've gotten very good at it. The real question is, are you desperate enough to let us try? Zextal glanced around the briefing room at his weary officers. Outside, alarms blared as sensors detected another Vorik probe assembling for an attack. Very well, he said at last. But I warn, you humans, the Vorik show no mercy to those who oppose them. Parker stood, his hand resting on his sidearm. Commander, mercy is something we save for after the shooting stops. Oh, and we're very good at making the shooting stop. As the human team prepared to return to their ships, none of them realized The galaxy was about to witness a new kind of warfare, one that would horrify both sides. The Zarians had called for help against monsters, not knowing they'd summoned something far worse. The real beasts were on their way. The Vorik attack began at dawn, ship time. Commander Zextal watched from the command center as the bioships swarmed, following their usual chaotic pattern to probe the station's defenses. But something was different this time. The human ships had moved far from the main fleet, positioning themselves in what seemed to be random, scattered locations. "What are they doing?" Kethfer asked, studying the tactical display. "They're not in formation. They're completely uncoordinated. Perhaps they don't understand proper fleet tactics," another officer suggested. Zextal remained silent, suspicion creeping into his mind. The humans understood tactics very well, he realized. They simply played by a different set of rules. On the EU's Defiance, Admiral Morrison watched the Vorik swarm approach. "All ships, this is Defiance. Remember, we're not here to look pretty. We're here to kill as many of these things as possible. Weapons free." Captain Amy Collins, commanding the stealth destroyer US Phantom, was the first to strike. Her ship, designed for ambushes, hit the Vorik where they least expected it. As the swarm closed on the main Zarian fleet, Collins targeted not the massive bioships, as the Zarians did, but the smaller support vessels that kept the swarm coordinated. Her weapons shredded ship after ship, disrupting the delicate connections. "That made the Vorik so dangerous? What is she doing?" Zextal demanded. "Those smaller ships aren't a threat?" "She's cutting the strings," Colonel Parker explained from the station. "The Vorik fight like a single organism. Break the links, and they're just isolated ships."
Oh.
Captain Rodriguez aboard the UES Ranger attacked from a different angle. Instead of engaging the main fleet, he launched long-range missiles at the Vorik staging area. The aliens, unused to weapons striking from such distances, were caught entirely off guard. Engineer Brooks delivered the biggest surprise. After studying captured Vorik biomatter with her team for 2 days, she activated a device that defied Zarian science. The device broadcast a signal mimicking Vorik communication patterns with a twist. Instead of coordinating the swarm, it issued contradictory commands. Half the Vorik turned left, the other half right, colliding into each other in chaotic confusion. "Impossible," Zextal whispered. "You can't hack a biological organism." "Can if you understand biology as technology," Brooks replied. "Overcomes. We've been fighting biological weapons for decades. This is just a larger version." The Vorik tried to adapt, but the humans shifted tactics constantly. When the aliens compensated for the jamming signal, Collins deployed mines. Disguised as ship debris, when they began avoiding the mines, Rodriguez targeted their supply lines with weapons that turned bioships into bombs. The most shocking moment came when a group of Vorik warriors boarded the UES Defiance. The Zarians expected the humans to fall back defensively, as civilized species did. Instead, they watched in stunned silence as the human crew launched an aggressive counterattack.
Marine Sergeant Danny Walsh led his team through the ship's corridors, not as defenders, but as
predators. They used the ship's systems as weapons, turning life support into a tool of suffocation and manipulating gravity to disorient their enemies. When ammunition ran out, they improvised, using tools as clubs and repurposing food prep areas into makeshift armories. "They're not defending," Kethver observed with disbelief. "They're hunting." The Vorik warriors, bred for combat and enhanced with bioweapons, were formidable. Yet in close combat, they were no match for humans. Within an hour, the boarding party was wiped out, and the humans began salvaging their remains for useful materials. "You study your enemies by dissecting them?" Zextal asked, appalled. "How else would we learn how they work?" Walsh replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Their bioweapons are fascinating. We might even use them against the swarm." The battle, which Zarians had expected to last 8 hours, ended in 3. The Vorik lost nearly 2/3 of their attack force, retreating in total disarray. For the first time, they failed to gather their usual intelligence on enemy defenses. "How did you do it?" Zextal asked during the post-battle briefing. "Admiral, Morrison, looking weary but satisfied, answered simply, "We fought to win, not to look good doing it. The Vorik have studied your tactics for years. They know exactly how you'll react in any situation. But they've never seen human tactics. Your methods are unconventional," Zextile said, searching for the right word. "They're effective," Parker interjected bluntly. "Look, Commander, we understand your rules, Honor, but the Vorik don't follow your rules," Parker said, his voice sharp. "They're trying to wipe out your entire species. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire." Captain Grant, still analyzing battle data, looked up from her reports. "The Vorik communication system is more vulnerable than we thought. If we can capture additional biotechnology, we might turn their coordination against them." "Turn it against them? How?" asked Kethver. "By feeding them false information," Engineer Brooks explained. "Make them think their own ships are enemies. Turn their swarm mentality into chaos." Zextile was silent for a long moment. The human's approach clashed with every principle of honorable warfare his people held dear, yet with their species. On the brink of extinction, the old ways were failing. "What would you need?" he asked at last. "Access to your manufacturing facilities," Morrison replied, "and permission to modify your weapon systems. Some of what we plan will probably violate your safety protocols." "Why?" Parker's smile was grim. "Because safe weapons don't kill enemies efficiently enough." Over the next week, human engineers worked tirelessly to modify Zarian technology. They stripped away safety features, overcharged power systems, and designed weapons capable of catastrophic failure but also devastating effectiveness. They began training Zarian crews in human tactics. The Zarians struggled with concepts like deception, surprise attacks, and psychological warfare. These strategies clashed with their cultural values. "You want us to lie to the enemy?" one Zarian officer asked during a training session. "We want you to mislead them," Hayes corrected. "Make them think you're going to do one thing, then do another. It's called tactical deception." "But that's dishonorable. So is extinction," Parker replied flatly. "Your choice." The real test came with the Vorik's next major assault. This time, the swarm brought a full battle fleet, including colossal bioships capable of destroying entire stations. The Zarians had never defeated an attack of this magnitude until now, as the Vorik fleet advanced. Combined human-Zarian force scattered in all directions. To an outsider, it appeared as chaos. Formations shattered, fleet coordination vanished. And individual ships moved unpredictably. The Vorik, accustomed to fighting organized opponents, were caught off guard. Ships appeared from unexpected angles, delivered devastating strikes, and disappeared before a counterattack could be mounted. The swarm's meticulous battle plans crumbled as humans introduced chaos and unpredictability. When the battle ended, the Vorik fleet was annihilated. More importantly, the swarm learned a lesson that would reshape the war. The humans didn't fight like any species the Vorik had encountered, in the depths of space. The Vorik Collective processed this new data, these beings from the galaxies. Edge fought with tactics no civilized race would consider. They fought without honor, without mercy, and without the predictable patterns the swarm had mastered. The Vorik began to feel something akin to uncertainty. They had dubbed these humans the small meat, assuming they would be easy prey. Now they realized their grave miscalculation. News of the human victories spread rapidly, rippling through both the Zarian Empire and the Vorik collective consciousness. Within days, the swarm's behavior shifted. Their attacks became more frequent, more desperate, and far more brutal. Commander Zextile reviewed reports from across the front lines with mounting unease. "They're abandoning their usual patterns," he told Admiral Morrison during their daily briefing. "The Vorik are targeting civilians, destroying everything they can't consume. It's as if they're trying to end the war before we can. Deploy more of your tactics." Morrison nodded grimly. "They're scared. We've introduced unpredictability into their calculations, and it terrifies them. Animals are most dangerous when cornered." "We're not animals," Zextile protested. "No," Morrison agreed. "There's something worse. Proof of just how much worse came when Captain Rodriguez received new orders from Earth Command. The message was terse but clear. Total War Protocol authorized. Rules of engagement suspended. Win at any cost. Rodriguez gathered his senior staff aboard the UEES Ranger to discuss the implications. Ladies and gentlemen, began, we're no longer bound by the Galactic Convention on Warfare. From now on, we fight to exterminate, not just to defeat. Chief Weapons Officer Carl Davis looked uneasy. Sir, some of the tactics we've been considering are ... extreme. The Zarians already see us as barbarians. They asked for our help, Rodriguez replied coldly. They're getting the full human experience. If they don't like it, they should have handled this themselves. Meanwhile, Engineer Brooks had been perfecting new weapon systems derived from captured Vorik biotechnology. Her latest invention unsettled even her own team. It's a biological weapon, she explained. It hijacks the Vorik reproductive process. Instead of creating new warriors, infected bioships produce toxic compounds that kill nearby vessels. That's chemical warfare, Davis objected. It violates every treaty we've signed. We've signed no treaties with... The Vorik Brooks shot back. They're not fighting clean either. They turn entire planets into breeding grounds. I'm just leveling the playing field. On the UEES Phantom, Captain Collins had developed her own approach. Her stealth ship now infiltrated Vorik-controlled space to plant devices that rendered entire sectors uninhabitable, no longer confined. 2 military targets. She attacked the infrastructure that kept Vorik worlds functioning. You're committing genocide, accused a Zarian observer assigned to her ship. Good, Collins replied flatly. That's the goal. You can't coexist with a species that seeks to consume all organic life. One of us has to go extinct, and I'd rather it be them. The humans adopted tactics that horrified their allies as much as their enemies. Redirected solar radiation to sterilize entire Vorik breeding worlds. They built weapons designed for maximum suffering rather than clean deaths. Exploiting the screams of dying bioships to disrupt swarm coordination, Colonel Parker had spent weeks analyzing Vorik behavior and communication patterns. His ability to predict swarm movements had become alarmingly precise. Driven by his willingness to adopt the ruthless logic of the collective consciousness, the key isn't to fight them. Parker explained to a mixed assembly of human and Zarian officers. The key is to become them, but better. They think as one mind controlling millions of bodies. We need to think as millions of minds, united by one goal, their total extinction. The Zarians were beginning to grasp the magnitude of what they had unleashed. In a recent battle, they observed human Marines boarding a damaged Vorik bioship not to capture it, but to analyze how its occupants had died. The humans studied the corpses with scientific detachment, cataloging the most effective ways to kill them. They're not soldiers anymore, Kethfer whispered to Commander Zextel. There's something else. What are they? Zextile asked. Apex predators, replied Lieutenant Commander Hayes, who had overheard. Humans didn't evolve to be civilized. Commander, we evolved to hunt and kill everything else. Civilization came later. The transformation was most apparent. In the human crews, soldiers who had been disciplined professionals a month prior now spoke nonchalantly about exterminating entire species. They modified their weapons not for efficiency, but for psychological terror. They wanted the Vorik to fear them. Engineer Brooks developed devices that caused bioships to violently implode. Captain Collins refined stealth technologies enabling her ship to infiltrate enemy formations undetected, striking without warning and vanishing like a ghost. Rodriguez commanded fleets with a precision and cohesion rivaling the Vorik swarm itself. But it was Admiral Morrison who authorized the most. Extreme measure yet. We're going to use stellar engineering, he announced, during a classified briefing for human officers only. Captain Grant has identified 17 Vorik breeding systems. We'll turn their stars into weapons. The plan was horrifying in its simplicity. By manipulating stellar magnetic fields, human ships would trigger massive solar flares, sterilizing entire systems, not just their planets, but everything within them. Sir, Communications Officer Stone said quietly. That will kill billions of Vorik. The Vorik don't have civilians, Morrison replied. Every one of them is part of the swarm. Every one of them is our enemy. What about other species in those systems? Stone pressed. There could be primitive life forms, maybe. Even civilizations we don't know about. Morrison was silent for a long moment. Acceptable losses, he said at last. We're fighting for the survival of civilization itself. Sometimes that means doing uncivilized things.
The stellar
Engineering project began immediately. The work of turning stars into weapons continued relentlessly. The process required weeks of careful preparation, but the results were devastatingly efficient. The first Vorik breeding system was annihilated in a burst of radiation visible from neighboring galaxies. In less than an hour, 17 billion and their infrastructure were incinerated, for the first time in its existence. The collective consciousness felt genuine terror. The humans didn't stop with one system. Over the next month, they systematically obliterated every significant Vorik breeding ground they could locate. Stellar engineering became an art form, each event designed to maximize destruction and psychological impact. Entire systems vanished. In cascades of light and radiation, the Vorik scrambled to adapt, shifting to defensive tactics for the first time. They abandoned forward positions, consolidated their fleets around critical worlds, and worked furiously to counter human innovations. It made no difference. The humans adapted faster. They're starting to use our methods, Captain Rodriguez observed during a strategy meeting. Some of their recent attacks show human-style tactics, Good Morrison replied. The more like us they become, the easier they are to predict. We've spent millennia countering our own strategies. This will be no different. The war had transformed into something no one had anticipated. The Vorik, once the galaxy's terror, were now on the defensive. The Zarians, who had pleaded for help, watched in alarm as their saviors proved to be more ruthless than their enemies. And the humans, initially reluctant participants, discovered a terrifying truth. They excelled at galactic warfare, in the quiet depths of space. Far from the chaos of battle, Admiral Morrison stood alone on the observation deck of the UEES Defiance. Behind him, the bridge crew worked efficiently, coordinating operations across dozens of star systems. Victory was imminent, but Morrison understood a darker reality. Once the Vorik were exterminated, the galaxy would still harbor the most dangerous predators it had ever known: the humans themselves. Unlike the Vorik, humanity could conceal its true nature until it was far too late for others to react. The final assault on the Vorik home cluster began at dawn, Galactic Standard Time. Morrison stood on the bridge, gazing at the massive fleet assembled for this ultimate battle. 300 human ships, 500 Zarian vessels, and dozens of hybrid craft combining human ingenuity with alien technology. The target was a cluster of 7 star systems housing billions of bioships and the core consciousness controlling the swarm. If the fleet succeeded, the war would end. Final weapons check complete, reported Captain Rodriguez from the UES Ranger. All ships ready for Operation Extinction. Morrison nodded, the operation's name a deliberate choice. This wasn't just a battle to defeat the Vorik, was an effort to ensure their species could never rise again. All ships. This is Admiral Morrison, he began. Today, we end a war that has consumed 43 worlds and lasted 3 long years. The Vorik have shown no mercy, no respect for life, and no willingness to coexist. They sought to consume the galaxy. Instead, they will be consumed by it. Over the past months, Commander Zextile had witnessed the humans evolve from hesitant allies into something that frightened him more than the Vorik ever had. The assault began with Captain Collins and the UAS Phantom spearheading a stealth strike into the heart of the cluster. Her ship carried a weapon engineer Brooks had spent weeks perfecting, a device capable of turning the Vorik's own collective consciousness against them, approaching the central nexus. Collins reported as her ship navigated the dense swarm of bioships defending the cluster. The Phantom's stealth systems, against with Zarian technology, rendered it nearly invisible even to Vorik biosensors. The Nexusa, massive organic structure, functioning as the swarm's brain, was their target. Destroying it would instantly kill billions of Vorik, but Brooks had devised something even worse. Her weapon wouldn't just destroy the Nexus, it would corrupt it, spreading chaos and madness throughout the collective consciousness like a virus. Device deployed, Collins announced. Getting out of here before things get ... interesting. The effect was immediate and horrifying. Corrupted. Signals rippled through the Vorik network, triggering bioships to attack each other. The once coordinated swarm dissolved into disarray as sections received contradictory orders, false memories, and manufactured fears. Admiral Morrison observed the chaos unfold, but he felt no triumph. This wasn't victory. It was extermination. Yet he had learned over the past months that sometimes extermination was the only viable solution. All ships, advance, he commanded. Remember, we're not here to conquer. We're here to cleanse.
Ow!
The combined fleet surged into the cluster like a plague. Human ships unleashed devastating weapons that turned entire worlds into burning husks. Zarian vessels, now armed with human-designed systems, fought with a ferocity that would have appalled their ancestors. Colonel Parker led his Marines in boarding operations against Vorik command ships not to capture them, but to ensure that nothing aboard survived. His teams moved through the bioships like a virus, systematically eliminating every living organism they encountered. Organic contamination eliminated on levels 1 through 15, reported Sergeant Walsh, moving to the spawning chambers. Spawning chambers were where new Vorik warriors were cultivated. Destroying them would cripple the swarm's ability to replenish its forces. But the humans didn't just destroy the chambers, they contaminated them, rendering all genetic material. Irreparably corrupted, Engineer Brooks oversaw the calculated annihilation of the Vorik's biological infrastructure. Her teams planted devices that would continue to poison the cluster long after the battle ended, ensuring it would remain uninhabitable for any organic life. Biological warfare on this scale is unprecedented, remarked Commander Zextile had. Watch the humans evolve from uneasy allies into something far more terrifying than the Vorthik. As the battle raged, Zextile observed human ships relentlessly targeting Vorthik breeding worlds. Every strike was precise, calculated to cause irreversible damage. They're destroying everything, Kethra whispered, horrified. Even the planets themselves. Nothing will live here again. They're not just defeating the Vorthik, Zextile replied. They're erasing them. The final phase of the battle centered around the core world where the swarm's oldest and most powerful consciousness resided. This was the mind that had orchestrated the galactic conquest, consuming 43 civilizations. Admiral Morrison led the assault personally, the UEE's Defiance engaging bioships the size of moons. Engineer Brooks's weapons tore through the organic behemoths as though they were paper. Target the consciousness centers, Morrison ordered. Make sure it feels every shot. The massive Vorthik consciousness retaliated, bending space. With gravitational weapons and a desperate attempt to crush the human fleet, but the humans knew their enemy too well. Every countermeasure struck precisely where it would cause the most damage. As the consciousness began to die, it sent one final message across the swarm. The small meat are not prey. They are predators. Flee. Hide. Never let them find you. But it was too late. The humans had already identified every outpost, every hidden colony, every escape route. Over the following weeks, human ships systematically hunted down the survivors. Captain Rodriguez led operations across 17 star systems, ensuring no Vorthik organism remained. His ships carried advanced sensors, detecting biological traces at a molecular level. Sector 7 Alpha cleared, Rodriguez reported during one of the final sweeps. No organic activity detected. Sterilization protocol complete. 3 months after the decisive battle, Admiral Morrison stood in the same Zarian command center where Commander Zextile had once begged for help. Now, the roles had shifted. The Vorthik threat has been eliminated, Morrison announced to the assembled Zarian leaders. Breeding colonies destroyed, genetic material contaminated, survivors exterminated, the galaxy is safe. Safe from the Vorthik, Zextile said quietly. But who will keep us safe from you? Morrison smiled, devoid of warmth. Commander, we are your allies. We're here to protect you. Protect us from what? You've just demonstrated the power to annihilate entire species. What happens if you see us as a threat? And make sure we never have a reason to, Morrison replied. The galaxy is full of dangers. Fortunately, you now have guardians who know how to handle such threats. In the months that followed, human embassy stations appeared throughout Zarian space. Officially, they were hubs for protection and technology transfer. Unofficially, everyone knew they were monitoring posts. Admiral Grant oversaw research on former Vorthic worlds, studying biological warfare and collective consciousness systems. Knowledge is power, she explained to wary Zarian scientists. The more we understand, the better we can protect the galaxy from future threats. But Grant's research wasn't purely defensive. Her team developed new weapons and methods, preparing for a war with an enemy yet unknown. The galaxy had been saved at a terrible cost. Humanity revealed itself as apex predators, capable of eradicating entire species without hesitation. Spoke of peace, yet their actions told a darker story. In the depths of uninhabited space, a lone Vorthic scout ship drifted silently. Its crew, killed by human bioweapons, left one final automated message. We called ourselves the Swarm, the inevitable doom of all organic life. We were wrong. The small meat from the edge of space are the true monsters. They hunt not for territory or resources, but for the pleasure of annihilation. The galaxy is now their hunting ground. The message faded into the void, unheard and unheeded. The galaxy celebrated its salvation, unaware that its saviors had become its greatest threat, asked ChatGPT.